everyone. John Coleman here, T and Mortgages podcast number 11. Can you believe it? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, everyone. How are you? Thanks so much, as John said, for joining us with the T and Mortgage podcast number 11. And thanks for subscribing and sharing.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to have Paul Tobin with me today, a friend or a business colleague for many, many years, and a guy who, if anyone would come to me and says they're looking to sell a house, he's the guy I would be putting in front of touch you. But today I've kind of asked him to come along to share his wisdom and his insights on what you, the first-time buyer, should be looking at when they go and visit a home. So I will leave it over to Norm to ask the relevant questions, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, and Paul, thanks so much for being on the T and Mortgage podcast. Of course, we're already before we started, we were having a little bit of fun, and we were talking about your fantastic logo and a little bit about your branding, huh?
Yeah, and I suppose my market is property owners and property owners selling, and so that's the space I'm in. And it's all about, for me, preparing a seller for market so that you can get to the point of completing a sale without any hitches. John is obviously representing, to a degree, the purchaser who is getting the mortgage, getting the whole process going, and then they're going out into the big bad world and they're meeting people like me, who is representing a vendor, but not representing them. But I think what's important here in the whole scheme of things, and what's slightly changing a little bit as well, and I'm going to give it, the best way of doing it is give an example. So at present, I'm selling a property in Hote. It's called Tormanby Lodge. I
know the area well. It's where I grew up, Paul. It's a lovely area.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So this property is an executive sale, and it was handed to me for the purpose of selling. So when I visited the property, I could immediately see that there was defects with the property. And of course, buyers are going to see that there's defects with the property. So to get ahead really of the process and trying to get to a point of being able to attract a buyer and get to the sale, the conclusion of a sale, I had a pre-inspection carried out in the property, which is a survey, which I have now shared with every buyer who's come in the door. Now, it's pretty damning and it's frightening for what people have to do. But first thing, what it does is it takes out the costs for the purchaser, which is 800 to 1,200 euro for a structural engineer's report of that particular scale. They're getting to see everything that's wrong, everything they'll have to do. And from there, they're able to pass it over maybe to engineers or builders, going to get some sort of costings as around what it would cost them to fix up that house to a standard that will work for them living there. Along with that, so I'm going somewhere with this just in terms of where a buyer meets an agent and meets a property, or let it be a second-hand home or whatever it might be. The next part of that process is that I've had the solicitors prepare contract for sale, title deeds, there was a deed of rectification, first registration, land registration maps, everything was prepared. So we had 40 viewers, 20 decided they'd like to receive the report, the inspection report. 10 decided they would go the next step and receive the documentation from the solicitor. And it is a leasehold, which we'll talk about that in a minute. And now 5 people are in the mix with their solicitors communicating to the point of being happy. And the process has just started now, where the first offer has come in for 600,000. So that's the reverse of what a first-time buyer would experience when they are going to view a property and place an offer. In their instance, they're going there not 100% sure about, they know about the location. Breffney was talking about all of that last week, location, how it suits their. They're now going to look at the house. they don't know whether this house is going to stack up as far as defects are concerned. How well is the heating system? Do I need to rewire? Do I need to? They don't have that information. But what's expected of them to do is to place offers on something that they don't know, get to the point of being sale agreed on that property. And when sale agreed on that property, then the process begins where the surveyor comes in and does the inspection. Then the solicitors exchange documentation. And often in these cases, a huge disappointment could occur where there is a problem with the property or there's a problem with the paperwork. And that's where you hear about disappointments that first-time buyers experience with sales falling through and so on. So it's not an easy task, even for a buyer to go out and say, you know, I like that house, I'm going to bid on it, I'm going to buy it. You know, there's a question mark always, unfortunately, especially around second-hand homes or older homes, is everything going to stack up here?
So you take a lot of the mystery out of it by getting everything prepared ahead of time. You know, people who are hesitant, they get cold feet because of especially visual defects, right? Not just, but you address those concerns from the start. You know,
well, not every vendor is open to doing that. So not every the purchaser is not going to get that very often in Ireland from an estate agent. They're not going to get to see all that. The point is they're going to have to enter into the whole process to understand everything about what they're buying. And that's the difficulty, less transparency.
You've probably given the perfect scenario there, Paul, for the buyer, the way you're operating in terms of the purchase, in terms of having done all the sort of the due diligence ahead of the process. But as you rightly point out, that isn't the norm. No pun and using the name, no intended, right? But
I don't have it trademarked. It's okay. You can use it.
Right? So that isn't what they experience, as you said. So maybe discuss with what they would normally expect and how they should best prepare themselves, or what they should be looking out for before they then have to get into that sort of doing the survey, etc. You know?
Yeah, but I suppose, you know, there's a number of different types of properties in the market, and I think what's happening now, especially in Ireland and more so than anywhere else, is that people are now beginning to look at the energy efficient rating of the property, and that is a very good indication of the condition of a property, you could almost say, because someone has gone to the trouble of retrofitting, as an example, or made improvements to their heating systems, insulated their attics. They might have installed dry lining inside and internally. So you can from the curb, as you walk through the house, you can get an impression immediately of a property and a condition. But often as well, you can go into a property where it looks really, really well. It's got an on the surface makeover, but everything under the bonnet is in bits.
We call that putting lipstick on a pig in the US. where you know the roof's falling and there's termites and the plumbing is cracking and the electricity's bad, but it's got a beautiful new lights and some upgrades in the bathroom and a new coat of paint. That's lipstick on a pig.
But I suppose
that gets a lot of buyers. It really, especially people who are unaware and it's their first time buying maybe, and they don't know what they should be looking at.
No, and for a buyer, walking in the door of a property and seeing sort of the nice finishes and so on, it's new to them, and the paint color or the feature wallpaper or the light fitting and things, it can sometimes emotionally take over a lot of things. But look, you're buying a second-hand home, you've got things to do, but I think the best advice I could give to any buyer, a first-time buyer in the market now, is you've got to look at where the energy efficiency of this home is. The ratings go up to E's or F's and G's and so on. You're getting into that. You're really getting into pretty substantial money to retrofit it out, to warm up your home. I mean, I heard an expression once. My brother bought an old house in Aylesbury in the UK once, and he used to say he used to open the windows to leave the heat in.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you mentioned something really interesting to me there recently when we met out about not just the house they're looking at, but in terms of the neighborhood. And there's some great clues to be gained from just actually looking at the neighborhood. Maybe you might expand on that.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, you know, again, you know, walking down the street or walking to your viewing and with your car parked up the road and so on, you do get an impression, don't you, really, of, I suppose, you know, type of neighborhood it is. You can see house number 3 has put in all new windows. House number 4 has got is insulated wraps from the front, or someone has solar panels. So you can see that, I suppose, you know, that a lot of retrofitting is taking place on the road. So, and you arrive at your house and it's kind of got this little bit of a dull look at the front, and you kind of say, well, you know, if the windows have been replaced on 4 or 5 properties on the road, chances are I'm going to have to do the same. Or, you know, if some people are wrapping, and, you know, there's lots of indications around what you need to do by looking at what neighbour properties have done, especially in mature areas. And there's all sorts of grants and schemes for that as well. But I suppose, Sean, like, you know, people are, we've a shortage of property on the market at the moment. You know, people are compromising a lot on what they're buying, and you know, they're getting in and they're getting stuck in, and over periods of time they're tipping away and bringing things up to a standard that are that is satisfactory. I know at the moment the most sought after homes in the market for first time buyers, whether they're, especially the second-hand market, are a minimum of a B energy rated home, because, as you know, John, they're offering green mortgages, the banks are, which is more favorable rates for these homes. So if you're in around a C1 rating, which is just the one notch below the B, there could be a couple of little simple fixes internally that you can do just to get up to that B. So I would say anything in around the C's and so on would certainly be something that, you know, I wouldn't be afraid of buying. When you get into the D's, you know, you've a bit more to go. And when you get into the E's and F's, it's really a refurb, really, in general. So I suppose, I don't know whether I'm answering the right questions, but I suppose what I'm trying to give you here today is that from a seller's perspective, you know, I'm telling you what is in demand, what buyers are chasing down, what has been bidded heavily on, versus what is, you know, going to cost someone a lot when they buy it, which are less appealing. But because we're in a market where we're short of stock, everything is being bidded up at the moment, because the bank of mum and dad are getting involved, and everyone is getting involved for people to get the right homes. But look, that's the second-hand home market, and that's how it is, and it's very much around how much is the running costs of this home going to be, and how much work.
You might elaborate a little bit on sort of, and this is where people are completely confused as well, on the bidding process, right? How do you personally operate? Some people there's online. Some people always say to me, "Yeah, I put another bid in," but then within an hour, someone's come back with another 10 grand on top, and there's a vacuum of kind of, well, this is brand new. You are representing the selling agent, so there's a gap of trust of sorts. Now, I know I would trust you with anything, but when you haven't dealt with people and you're not representing them, there is that sort of fear factor. So how would you, what thoughts or what words would you give to the first time buyer on the bidding process?
Well, look, so to take out the fear of being tricked or lied to for a minute. Every agent in Ireland now is licensed. You have to be licensed, and we have extremely heavy regulation on us. And the process around receiving offers and passing offers onto the vendor have to be documented. You know, I haven't heard of anyone going investigating offers as yet, especially if they were done. But I think there is a process there that if someone felt, you know, that they were told an offer came in at 10 or 20 grand and they had to go and top it. I think there is a process there. If someone really felt afterwards that they were after being tricked, that they could go and investigate that, because there has to be documentation from the agent to like all offers in our office have to be received in writing by email with loan offers in advance as well, loan approval in principles on file, so that the buyer or the bidder, for example, is not bidding against somebody who we have no intention of selling to, or that we're not receiving offers from someone who hasn't shown us some evidence of ability to purchase.
So I think when you mentioned the approval in principle, Paul, I always say to people, to clients, like in human nature being what it is, this is all about buying the home, but having their finance in place before that is really, really important. I always say to people, please don't fall in love with a house before the bank has said yes to you. And that's really, really crucial, because suddenly you're bidding, banks, you go to a house, you fall in love with it, this is where you see your future, and then suddenly you have, well, you can't get your paperwork quickly. The banks come back with stupid questions or whatever. So that point you make is really, really bad. And it's a point I always hammer home with people, even if I sound like a cross school teacher in the process. It's the tough love, you know?
Yeah. I suppose one of the things that I do that's probably, you know, it could be a little bit questionable even from a vendor's perspective, which is from my client's perspective, is that not everyone wants to show their hand, do they? You show Paul Tobin an approval in principle, and it says that you're approved in principle for 500,000. But this house is on the market at 400, and Paul goes, oh, they've got another 100 grand I'm going to be able to squeeze out of them, you know? So I'm always happy to receive an approval in principle with the amount redacted.
Okay.
Because I can see, you can still scroll through and see the conditions below. You can see the engagement with the bank. You can see that you've been, you know, I think to be fair to any purchaser, if you don't want to show your hand, you've shown your approval in principle, you just haven't shown. I have never, and people talk about this all the time, I have never met somebody who gave me an offer that wasn't able to back it up with a loan offer approval when it came to the point of being sale agreed. 18 years later, I've never met anyone who bluffed it. Okay, and you know in advance. So I think a purchaser going to see a property, expresses an interest in the property, should bid with confidence. Like it is, that's the market we're in now. I remember one time you'd ask 400 and you'd expect to get around 350 and 360. Now you ask 400 and you expect to get 425 or 450, or in some instances it's been 500. But I think a purchaser needs to embrace the fact that the estate agent I'm dealing with, is fully licensed, fully regulated. If for any reason I feel there's anything underhanded or whatever, there is the property regulator that I can approach at some point if I think it's all kind of gone a little bit in you know, or I'm concerned about something. Not trying to say to everyone go there to check anything, but
there is some accountability.
It's there. So because I often meet purchasers who go, yeah, and the agent rang me back and said another 10, and I'm not sure I believe him. And you can't do that. Like he either has the 10,000 and he's. I think
I get said the same thing, Paul. And the point I always say to them is, listen, the agent is required, as you just highlighted, to record all documents. But in the scheme of things, 10,000 on an extra bid for you isn't really worth, for your overall, from what your personal fee from it is not worth that much in the scheme of things. So ultimately, you're just trying to make the sale happen as quickly as possible. You're not trying to.
That's the agenda, is to actually close the sale, not play games and waste everyone's time. And you know,
absolutely. And like we always, you know, I think, you know, to say that there's no emotion in it is wrong. I always have a favorite, but they don't always get it. I always have someone who I know they really want it, and I know whatever, and then back and I go, oh, dear John, I'm afraid party three has just placed another offer of €5,000. And then I usually say the offers to date are as follows. And then I list all the offers, party one, what time they bidded, when they bidded. So there's a long, long, long list of all the bids that have taken place. Here's where you're offered, there's where you're placed. So they can, I do it manually. I know there's an online system. I do it manually because there's a little bit of if you want to call me, and they can call me, and they go, oh, look, I see party one. God, he didn't bid for 2 days, and then he jumped back in, and he's just gone up 5. So they can see there's a lot of transparency around how I do it on a manual basis. But I often will be pitching for someone, you know, and because from an agent's point of view as well, we can also identify who would be a good purchaser, who will close this deal, who will follow through on this, because there's some people who are very trigger happy from purchaser's perspective, who will lash in offers and mightn't be as committed. And I often, when I look at that, sometimes you mightn't hear from them in 2 days, and they might come in with €1,000. I usually pick up the phone, you know, and I go, well, how are you doing? Have a conversation, and you might get the impression that these guys are, well, I'm bidding on something else, and they're offering this something else. So look, I think purchasers need to have confidence in the agent that they're bidding, that the bidding is transparent, that it's honest. But unfortunately, it's an upwards market, and what can you do? You represent your client as best you possible. You can't exclude somebody else or push somebody else out. You have to give everyone the opportunity. But what I think is really important, and I always make sure, is that it's an even playing field, that I have evidence of ability to purchase from 3 parties or 4 parties, whatever number of them are bidding. And what also is important, that I'm not including someone who's depending on the sale of another property where there might be a chain of 4 or 5 involved, and they could be bumping up the purchase price all along, and my client might have no intention of selling to them. So I would keep them out of it. You know, so I'm just saying it has to balance, and it has to be fair, and it has to, and most agents, I believe, do operate exactly the same. Irrelevant to what a purchaser might see in their personality when they meet them, you know, there's a procedure, and it's followed, and it's checked, and we're audited every 3 years.
So it's, Paul, let me ask you something, switching gears. You mentioned a couple times the current market and still how it's a climbing market, and low inventory, rising prices, though rates have come up. If you read newspapers, the media, it's sort of the best of times, worst of times thing, where they're saying prices have to come down, prices are going to be, but what are you seeing? I mean, I know John says he's not seeing prices come down. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, again, you know, it's all revolved around the exact items I mentioned earlier. The demand for well-finished, good energy rating homes is still the most active market that exists, and the bidding is still happening quite aggressively on those. The market for homes that need work is a slower market.
So it's a little bit discerning, you know, now.
Yeah. So, you know, but in general, most of my clients at present who I am selling for are landlords exiting the market. That's where we're at. They're exiting for a number of reasons: legislation, regulation, capped rents. One guy is getting 1,200 for a 2-bedroom house. Next door, his neighbor is getting $3,000. You know, he was happy getting 1,200 as long as his neighbor could only get 1,200, but his neighbor got $3,000. He's selling. So there's a lot of activity still going on in the market around the sale of properties that have been owned by landlords, and most of them for many, many years, who are tired and getting out. And then the other market that's very, very strong at the moment from the seller's perspective is those who became accidental landlords many years ago and never thought they'd see these prices come back. And now they're back, and they're in the market as well for selling. But I can't see it dropping off I think prices have stabilized. I think there's no question around that. I notice of late that some of my competitors, where I've gone for the same properties, have their asking prices pitched really at the very, very top end of what they could achieve, if not maybe a little bit too high. And I'd say that's slowing things down a little bit from a purchaser's perspective. So it's not continuing, and it's not continuing. It's not going up by no means. But the asking prices, which can often throw out a false indicator in the market of where prices are, I think I'm seeing more of that. And I think that's a competition thing, to be honest, between agents, you know, promising someone a higher value. And like there was one I looked at there, my valuation was in around 460, which is correct. He'll probably sell for in around that. And one of my competitors got it and he has it up at 520. And
just to get the business, right? But then you have a disappointed client, right?
But you're also, you know, there's so much of it going on because the supply is so low that even what purchasers are seeing now in the market is, you know, prices, you know, continue to go upwards. I think there's a lot of it because we would use sold prices as comparables versus asking prices, which is what you would see if you went on to DAP and so on. And I think there's a lot of property being pitched above really where they should be. And I think following on from that, it's definitely encouraging more sellers to put their homes on the market.
Interesting. And another question I have, we talked about refurbishing properties. We talked about your design background as well. That's part of what you do with your firm, correct? And part of your experience is refurbishing properties?
Yeah. So a typical client of ours would be a landlord who may own a property for 15 or 20 years and it's tired and he wants to bring it to market and wants to maximize the sale price. So with an investment in a refurbishment, it not only gives a purchaser a very good product, it also gets to that marketplace where I'm talking where income comes to 10,000, people bid pretty well for those homes because we actually would begin with a refurbishment starting with the fabric of the building, as we described, the under the service, the pig without the lipstick, and repair in. So it could be from heating systems, heat controls, dry lining, plumbing, wiring, whatever it might be, and you're coming in now to the surface. And if you don't have a remaining budget for the surface, we're happy to sell something that needs to be painted. We're happy to sell something that needs to be, you know, another few layers. But what we have done is we've provided upgrades that are the most expensive upgrades and upgrades that will help with a surveyor checking it off as being a good condition property.
And the highest return on investment, right? For the seller. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's great. And I noticed, of course, you have your own estate agency. How long has that been in operation? How many people do you have working there?
So we're up by next year it'll be 18 years. Wow. So yeah, so it's a while. And I was involved in some of the franchises, but I've always used my own name. That's many, many years ago. But I'm in business 18 years. Limited the company in 2014. We're sole trading up from 2010 or whatever it might be. The model of the business is that we refurbish and style properties for market. So we're offering what we would say is a pretty good product for a seller to maximize the sale price and for a buyer to have very little to do. We manage properties as well, lettings, we carry out valuations, and in general it's a turnkey service, and we are expanding a little bit soon, and we won't leave that one out for now.
Paul.
Well, we're going to really push the turnkey end of things. We're going to be able to assist, especially those in the market for selling a home, putting their furniture into storage, offering storage facilities, a bit more staging in-house rather than a bit of subcontracting that we do at the moment, and move into some auctions around mid-century furniture and unusual things that we're throwing in skips every day, and that people are starting to pre-loved.
That's wonderful. That's a great niche that you're in. Yeah. And if someone, maybe they're a landlord and they want to get out, and it's funny, in the US, they say the landlords get out, 4 reasons, the T's, and that's toilets, tenants, taxes, and termites. And when you start getting frustrated with those, and I feel the pain. I actually have a property, still a rental in the US, and it's just one thing after another. So when you see that value pop up, you're like, oh, it is the time to sell. So if someone does have questions or wants to get in touch for your services, where can they reach you?
Yeah, with I suppose from a seller's perspective, I mean, our market is the market of property owners. And that's the space we're in, and we're not on the buyer's side. Obviously, we would do everything we can to assist a buyer who is buying through our firm, and always happy to offer a bit of advice. Never ever turn down. I get buyers popping all the time and they say, "Look, we're bidding on something up the road. What do you think?" And it's always around the mistrust about the offers and so. So look,
as John gets too. I know John gives a lot of advice as well. Yeah.
So look, I mean, we're here. We're in Junction 6 in Castleknock, and there's plenty of parking spaces. There's Insomnia Coffee next to us. If a property owner want to come down and have a chat about some properties, or we're putting something on the market, we'd like to speak to. And if a bar absolutely wants some assistance around a bit of advice, we'd be delighted to have a conversation with them.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And John, do you have anything else?
No, just to thank Paul. Obviously, Paul's learned a lot of new American slang today. But apart from that, just to thank him for coming on and share, because I knew you were going to bring some really great value to the clients, because it is a mystery. Brittany was on last week, as you know, and she gave some really high level stuff in terms of, but I can't wait to get both pieces of information out to my clients, what Brittany gave us and what you've touched on today, so that a first-time buyer looking at a second-hand property is armed with as much information as they possibly can. So, Paul, thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. That was wonderful.
Yeah, nice to speak to you both, and see you, and best of luck.
Everyone, thanks very much, Paul. As I thought, amazing information that we can't wait to share. And thanks to everyone else for listening.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening and tuning in to the T and Mortgage podcast. And we'll see you next month. Take care.